All right. Well, welcome, Jessi.
Hello,
I my name
Kiki.
is my name is Kiki Dickinson, and I'm the new Building Healthier Community manager and navigator. Super excited to have our first webinar going on. We're going to keep it really casual, and it'll be accessible to you guys, and you can share with other people. I'm really excited to now that we've moved through our like pilot stage of growing, building healthier communities and getting families to share with each other and finding out what other resources. So I'm really excited to welcome Jessi Sterba, St. Croix County Birth to Three coordinator. And Jessi and I have actually worked together for almost 25 years. She just told me that she's on her 25th year in February. I've been working in birth to three for probably 29 years because I've been practicing for 30 years. So we have lots of stories and lots of enjoyment in the birth to three model. And for 2026, I thought, what a great opportunity to learn from someone from Jessi that has so much experience. And we really want to share with you about the birth to three model, how to get involved in it. If you have a kid in birth to three, birth to the ages 0 to 3, um, and like sometimes even physicians might want to watch this to learn how the process works and things like that. So, Jessi, I'll let you tell a little bit more about yourself.
All right. As Kiki said, have been working in birth to three for start of my 25th year coming up here. And I am an early childhood special education teacher and also a service coordinator. My role in birth to three has evolved over the years. So I did start out doing a lot more teacher services, but as the years have gone on, I have transitioned to more of the mostly service coordination role, and then just supporting others in our birth to three program.
All right. So, I've had a couple little questions here to start us out with is can you just tell us in general what the birth to three program is? Just general idea who gets to be a part of it and how do they access it?
Yeah, so every state has a form of birth to three in it. And we are Wisconsin's program, early intervention program for infants and toddlers who are under three who have disabilities. We help kiddos improve on their learning skills. We support parents. We'll talk a little bit about our model as we go on here. But a big part of the program is really supporting parents in helping their kiddos learn based on their daily routines. And all of it is done within a kiddo's natural environment. We're required to do things in a natural environment. We do not have a specific location that families are able to come to. We actually go to them. So all of our services take place, whether it's in the family's home, it can be in daycares. Lately, we've done a lot of visits even out in the community, for example, in a library. We see kiddos who are in their foster homes. Um, Trying to think of any other examples. Sometimes we even um, help families if they're having challenges in other environments, let's say going out in the community to a place like Walmart. So,
Yeah, we were just talking about that yesterday, Jessi, with one of the kids is getting OT as their primary coach, and we'll define that as well as we move on. But that's really the highest stress for this family is going out in the community. The child gets overwhelmed with noises and gets distracted. And so then the OT said, well, we could meet at Walmart and help problem solve, and then they can see what's going on and support the family. So let's start with
absolutely.
how do you go ahead and oh, one thing that came up is so a service coordinator can be lots of different things. So you're an early child teacher, but it could be a PT, OT, speech therapist in different counties, right?
Absolutely. Yep. A service coordinator. We also, in our program, we have social workers who are
Oh, yeah,
also
of course. Yeah.
yeah, social workers in our program who are also service coordinators. So, yeah, a lot of different professionals can be service coordinators in the Birth to Three program. Absolutely.
And in Wisconsin, it's through the county, correct? It's run
Absolutely.
through
Yep.
each county.
Yep.
Okay.
The
And then
funding.
we the funding comes to the county, and then you work for St. Croix County and you do this area. And then there's Pierce County has a program and
Mhm.
different areas.
Mhm.
So if you move from one county to another, then they help you transition. Or we have some kids that move from like Polk County, and then we take their written plan, which we'll go over as well. So
Mhm.
it's really versatile, and even in Minnesota, it's through the school district, correct?
Absolutely. Yep. Mhm.
So how does that handle then that way?
Yeah, if
I mean,
kiddos transition between programs, different states have different criterias for qualifying for services in the Birth to Three program. It's also sometimes called something different. Like in Minnesota, I believe it is Help Me Grow, versus
yeah, help me grow.
in Wisconsin, it's called Birth to Three. So every state also has a little different language and different requirements to be eligible for Birth to Three programs. And we frequently have families that either move from other states or um, from Minnesota. We also have families that move to other states, and we also will help families locate their local Birth to Three programs when they do transition to other states or other cities within Wisconsin. We help with that.
Okay. You know what I was thinking? Before you tell us more about the referral process,
Mhm.
let's talk about kids that do qualify. I'll start with a couple since I'm a physical therapist. I see lots of kids that are late walkers. I see children with Down syndrome, um, kids that have had maybe a traumatic brain injury. We've even had kids that have had other medical procedures like that they need extra help. Lots of babies with torticollis that have some tightness in their neck. There's a gamut, but lots of late walkers, definitely kids with birth histories, traumatic births that end up with diagnosis of HIE, which is hypoxic encephalopathy, cerebral palsy. But we definitely families can, if they're just worried, oh, my kid's not sitting like my friend's kids, or they're not crawling, or different things. Like sometimes you go to the doctor and you're nervous, and then they're like saying, well, come back in 3 months. But if you are, you trust that mom or dad knowledge and trust yourself or your daycare, and you can be like, hey, I'm going to contact Birth to Three because I want to see if there's anything else I could do. And so
Mhm.
those are some of the kids. What are some of the
Yeah.
other kids we serve?
Speech. A lot of kids are referred because parents or their physicians are concerned about being behind in their talking. So I would say we have a lot of kiddos in birth to three who are receiving services for speech. Oftentimes, it's actually a little more prevalent in little boys. So we oftentimes have a lot of little boys that are in our program working on speech. Um, Autism, of course, a lot of kids come to us with some, parents have concerns about some things that they've seen or heard about that may look like autism spectrum disorder.
True.
So oftentimes we are, helping them kind of sort out what is what. There's a lot of kids maybe with some sensory processing challenges. Sometimes kiddos who are referred who aren't transitioning to solid foods. We
Right.
get
Good
some
point.
of those kiddos as well. So there's a wide
Right.
variety. It's different all the time. Sometimes we'll have kind of a rash of a certain kind of something, and then the next, month or two, it'll be something different. So, yep,
Right.
it's
We
always
see
different.
kids that are picky eaters, kids that are, yeah, like you said, having trouble transitioning from purees. Some kids, more, sometimes they're having trouble taking a bottle, like there's definitely options to help with that, especially if it's ongoing. So, and then from a fine motor standpoint, what are some things that you think that a lot of times parents are concerned with?
The fine motor aspect, there are some kiddos who may be late to develop a grasp on picking up small items. Sometimes we recommend kiddos like that have their vision checked.
Yes.
And speaking of vision, we also are able to have other um, professionals support us in what we do. So we also have access to teachers who work with kids who have vision impairments, and we also have access for um, kiddos who have hearing impairments as well. We have some other professionals that we can go to when we have concerns or need more information on that.
And that made me think of something too. If you're watching this and you're thinking, I want to refer my child because they're not talking. If they're, we always recommend that families have the child's hearing checked to make sure they are
Mhm.
hearing. If you've had a child with lots of fluid in their ears or reoccurring ear infections, if they're not able to hear well, then they're, of course, that makes it hard to learn language in order to talk. So
Mhm.
that's another area that we'll definitely see them, but we also make sure that the families check that out as well. So
Mhm.
one thing
Yeah.
I've learned as a joint visitor is that a lot of these kids with this with speech delays, we try to figure out, or we do with an assessment we do, we'll find out like if they have expressive language, meaning they have trouble talking, but sometimes it's their receptive is lower. So if they don't understand language, they can't talk. So we help people kind of families tease out what that is and how to help them. So let's
Mhm.
just jump into how people can be referred to. Again, we're part of the St. Croix Valley Building Healthier Communities, so we're talking to you to kind of find out specifically, but then of course it's a lot of it is more general too. So,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, so specific to St. Croix County, kids are referred to us in a variety of ways. So I would say the biggest majority of our kiddos get referred from their family physicians, but that is not the only way. A lot of families are surprised to hear that they can actually make a referral on their own. I've had a family recently that said, I kept talking to my doctor about this. I kept sharing that I was concerned, but that doctor didn't make a referral until the kiddo was probably past the point of where they should have been referred. And the parent did not understand that they could just call us and make that referral on their own. So families are always more than welcome to call us. Sometimes daycares make referrals
Yep.
on kiddos. We have a phone number that families can call. And do you want me to share that, Kiki?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so the phone number that you can call if you're in St. Croix County is 715-246-8260. And that phone number goes directly to some gals who are trained in asking families questions. They will collect lots of demographic information on kiddos. They'll collect insurance information. They'll ask a little bit of information about what you're concerned about and why you're calling. And then also if there's any important medical information to share, they'll also ask you that as well. If you are in some other part of Wisconsin and you're listening to this, there is on the Department of Health Services website, you can actually click on the Birth to Three program and go in there and you can put your county of residence in there. And then it'll give you information on who like the director is of the program or what phone number you can call to get a hold of your local Birth to Three program.
Oh,
So
thanks,
once
Jessie.
kid,
That's very helpful. That's very
yeah.
helpful. Thanks.
So once kiddos are, so once they've talked to our intake gals who take that information, in our program, we actually have two different teams, and that is how you end up talking to me or my coworker. Her name is Sarah, and we divide our county kind of in half. And certain locations go to one team, and another location goes to another team.
And
So,
that's because
yeah.
it helps the therapist not have to be driving across the whole county necessarily. So that's how it kind of works.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's important about that referral process. Think of,
Um, I think that once you get that, get an intake person. I think
Mhm.
that
Okay,
covers it.
okay.
Um, I just think that one thing is that sometimes daycare people I know from being in a lot of daycares is that some parents are kind of sensitive or defensive, in general, and about like their kid, maybe there's something that they're not doing as well as the other kids or their behaviors. And we didn't really talk about that one is we definitely see lots of kids that are biting or like at risk for getting kicked out of daycare, having
Mhm.
trouble transitioning. So it's really across the gamut. But that was one thing that I wanted to mention that that if you're wondering how your kid's doing, the daycare may not necessarily, if your child's in daycare, they might not mention that to you right away. So you might be like, hey, are you concerned that they're not sitting or crawling? I mean, they may not be therapists, but they are experts in children, just like families are experts in children. So, or if like, are they having trouble with this? So sometimes if the parent is confident enough to like bring that up, then they might share more with you and be like, yeah, maybe it would be a good idea. Or yeah, I've noticed the child doesn't look to their right side or they're not playing with the other kids. You know, there's such a range of what's typical. So it's nice to have all the professionals to help tease out what that is. So, okay, so the
Yeah.
referral, you get the referral, and then what happens,
Hmm.
Jessi?
Yeah. So once that referral comes to me, I reach out to families within a couple of days and we talk about what their concerns are. And then from that point, we set up a time to meet together. I will go out to the family's home. This is one of those visits that one parent is needed to be there or the guardian who's ever able to legally sign off and consent to uh, paperwork. So I do a home visit, and on that home visit, I use a screener to look at kiddos and see where they're falling as far as their development goes. If a kiddo already has a diagnosed condition, let's say they're a baby with Down syndrome, we kind of forego that screening because at that point we already know they're eligible for birth to three. But if it's a kiddo that we don't know that they don't have a diagnosed condition, then I'm doing a brief screener where I'm looking at about 5 different areas of development. I also have we've developed our own tool. We're asking some additional questions based on some sensory processing concerns. So we look at touch, we look at self-regulation, we talk about sleep, we talk about eating. And from there, we get a good idea, a good sense of does this kiddo need further evaluation right now? And if we decide that that kiddo does, then we kind of take those next steps and we cover, birth to three in a nutshell, kind of what it is, what it entails, who might be on their evaluation team. So we do a lot of talking about that. We talk a lot about families' rights in birth to three. So this is not a mandated program. This is a program that you can be in if you want to. And at any point in time, if a family chooses it's not the right program for them, they're more than welcome to decide that they want to be discharged from the birth to three program. So we talk about those things as well. Um, Once we determine that a kiddo is going to go to evaluation and we've gone over their development, we also spend some time talking about their family. We talk about things that are important to the family. We talk about what their concerns are if we haven't already touched on some of those. We talk about what does their daily routine look like? Where do they sit to eat? Do they sit at a table? Do they not sit at a table? Where do they sleep? Do they sleep in parents' bed? Do they not sleep in parents' bed? So we go through their whole daily routine. We also talk about what routines throughout their day are very difficult for them. Those are really pieces that we want to focus in and hone in and really helps us kind of figure out where we might want to help support families during those daily routines. Um, we also talk about their support system and who they might go to if they need support in their lives. We talk about have they experienced any trauma that might impact their child. We talk about what things they like to do with their child and family again, so we can talk about ways to incorporate strategies into those things that they like to do. And then we also cover other resources that they may be looking for. So some families may need help finding a daycare. Some families, may need help finding somebody to test a child's vision or test a child's hearing. Um, Today, I had a family that was interested in home visiting from another program. So we talked about Family Resource Center and Head Start. So a lot of times our conversations are about a variety of things. From there, parents sign off on paperwork in order to take that next step to have their kiddo assessed.
And one thing I just wanted to say is that families can answer whatever they want to. If they're like, you know what,
Mhm.
I don't really want to talk about my family life or trauma, they can just decline to answer. We're just trying to gather information to help the families. So
Yes,
that's great.
that is
Okay.
very true. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so from there we do we choose our team. So I don't know, did you talk? I guess you did talk a little bit about the team that it could we're
Just
required
a
to have a
teeny bit.
okay.
Yeah, let's talk more about our team. Yeah.
Yeah. So on each of our teams in St. Croix County, we have a social worker, we have a teacher, early childhood special ed teacher, we have a physical therapist, occupational therapist, and a speech therapist. And then these other professionals that occasionally are needed, so that teacher for the visually impaired, and then deaf and hard of hearing staff as well sometimes. We are required to have two evaluators when we do assessments. Sometimes we have more than two people there. Typically, it's two though, on that evaluation team.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah,
what else
so
did you want me to?
just to give you a break from talking, I'll help you out here a little bit too.
Yeah.
So first of all, I forgot to mention, so I work for St. Croix Therapy as well as Building Healthier Communities, but I also St. Croix Therapy contracts with the county for physical therapy. So that's how I kind of fit into this role. So I do treatment at the clinic and then also birth to three. So one thing I was thinking is like once you have that intake meeting, you gather that information, and then you said you decide who's going to come out and be the team decides who are the best people to look at this child and to evaluate them to see if they qualify, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So how much time can we kind of look at the timing, like
Yeah.
how many days? Because I know we always have to pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to that.
Yes. So when that referral comes in, we have 45 days to process that referral. Typically, we're getting in for that intake meeting with the family within 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes sooner. If a parent's like, hey, I'm off of work this Friday and I'm available, then I'm hopping over and I'm going out on a Friday a couple days later. So between the time we get that in referral and the time we're all done and have a kid enrolled, it needs to be within 45 days. Now, sometimes families get sick or something comes up, an emergency, and that doesn't always happen, and that's okay too. But we try our best to get kiddos in within 45 days. Once we do that evaluation, we're required to start working with that family within 30 days. So once they're officially enrolled, the therapists have 30 days to get that first visit in, but typically it happens within the next week or two.
So I was thinking about situations that we've experienced, Jessi and other providers have experienced where maybe the mom is concerned, but the dad isn't, or vice versa, or they're not sure if they really want to go through with getting weekly or whatever services are determined. So that they don't need to just by agreeing for people to come out and do the evaluation, they're not agreeing to do birth to three, right?
Yep.
That's just in between. Yeah.
Yep, there's lots of opportunities for families to get more information, but not necessarily be enrolled in our program. So, sometimes if I see a family, I'm in there for that intake visit and they're kind of not really sure if they want to go to eval. Sometimes we'll just say, let's check back in a couple of months. And so they'll go on my little list to check back in a few months. Same thing when we evaluate kiddos. Let's say they were right borderline with a certain area, but they're making some nice progress or they've suddenly taken off in a certain area and parents just don't really quite want to agree to into services in their home quite yet. Same thing. We can always check back with those families and reconsider enrolling them at a later date if they're still having some difficulties with their development.
Right. And that made me think of getting ahead of myself, but I don't want to forget to mention this is that therapy, like we said, I guess you did say it, but therapy can be taking place in the daycare as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I know we were just talking about who could refer, but also same thing,
Mm-hmm.
we can go to daycares. We like to go both home or community place with the parents and then daycare, but we realize that parents, it doesn't work out for parents to be home every week or every other week, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
frequency is of the
Mm-hmm.
sessions. I think one thing before we move forward with that, I want to make sure we talk about the cost of the program because
Yep.
sometimes people think it's they get the wrong information that it's free for everyone, and
Yep.
there's so the cost share and that kind of piece. So
Yeah. So the evaluation and the screening, they're always free to families. So we never want a family to feel like, uh-oh, this is going to cost me money. I don't want to do it. Um, we are always able to do that screening and that evaluation for free. Now, if you have insurance, we can bill your insurance for therapies, but the state of Wisconsin also has what's called a parental statement of a parental fee for our program or a cost share. And that is based on your income, your family size, and your insurance. It ranges from $25 a month to $150 a month. There's a lot of things that go into that. If, for example, you're on medical assistance, not through Katie Beckett, um, most of the families that qualify for things like WIC or food share, those families will not qualify for a cost share in the birth to three program. But if you have private insurance, we will be looking at that income, family size, and insurance. So um, the good news is if, let's say, you have a really high deductible, we're actually going to help you meet your deductible on every visit.
mhm.
So that is nice. Um, the amount of visits that you get, it doesn't change the cost share at all. It's the same regardless of if you get one visit a month or four visits a month. It would be the same. If you are discharged from the birth to three program, at that point, that cost share does end. Um, the really good news is once you turn three, you go into it. It's a different pot of funding through the school system, and there is no longer that cost share. So there is always for sure an end date, but it is one of those things that's not great or not fun for us to think about or talk about, but we have to do it.
Right. And the cost share, I mean, if you think about it, you would have a deductible. Sometimes people's deductibles are even like 50 or $70 per session. You don't have to drive to a facility to get the therapy. So it's helping pay
Hmm.
for people on the roads and all the paperwork and all the things. So there's a lot that goes into the services. So
Yeah, and
it's definitely
if you have that big copay, you don't have to pay that. You only pay your cost share, and birth to three covers the rest. So let's say you have a $25 cost share a month, you're doing, that's pretty good because then we're going to cover everything else. So, yeah.
right. Good. Yeah, that's really helpful for people to understand. And Jessi said something about if you have Katie Beckett. And so that just makes me realize another talk that I'm going to have to set up. I'm excited to get more of these on here. But just in general, Katie Beckett is it's not based on financial need, but on physical need or behavioral need, some sort of diagnosis that your kid, and that's a whole nother deal. But just wanted to kind of mention what that was. Okay. So we have the
Mm,
process of once they come to your house and you have at least two people assessing, and I think
mhm.
it's nice to have this because parents can be even more prepared. You might even end up sharing this with some of your families to know more about the birth of three,
Sure.
which is very cool.
Hmm.
But as
Yeah.
far as the evaluation, lots of questions are asked. We use a thing called the DAISY. What does it stand for?
Yep, developmental assessment of young children and is the second version. So that is one of our tools that we use pretty consistently. We also have another tool, or a couple other tools. One is looking more at sensory processing, and then we have another tool that's looking a little more in depth about social emotional slash self-regulation. So we have a couple tools in our back pockets that we use depending on what our concerns are with each kiddo.
And that's the DECA, right? Is that the
The
DECA?
DECA. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so that's really also great because I think sometimes parents are like, okay, it makes sense, refer, my kid's not talking, they're not walking. Um, but there's so many other things that kids, have trouble with self-regulation, being able to focus and pay attention, or like we talked about the biting or other things. So this
Mm-hmm.
birth to three program is for all children with all the needs and everything,
Mm-hmm.
here to support families, which I think when parents are struggling with some of those, we don't like to use the word behaviors sometimes. I don't personally, because I feel like there's always a reason for why kids act the way they act. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
good. So we kind of know what that process is. We do that and we ask a lot of questions and we gather that information and then we
Mm-hmm.
take the scores, and then what happens from that, Jessi?
So we're determining if kiddos are eligible for our program. Kiddos are eligible in 3 different ways in birth to three. So we've talked a little bit about having that diagnosed condition, something like significant prematurity, Down syndrome, autism. There's a whole list. Um, that is one way to qualify. Another way to qualify is having a 25% delay in one area. So that can be communication, motor, social, adaptive, or learning. And then the third way kids qualify in birth to three is having atypical development as determined by our team there that day. And so that's for those kiddos who just kind of don't meet any other criteria, but we're concerned enough that we want them enrolled in birth to three. Something just isn't typical about what's going on. Maybe it's like we've talked about, they aren't transitioning to foods very well. Sometimes our kiddos who have that diagnosis of torticollis don't have a delay, but they have this head turn and they have a misshapen head. And we know they need some supports in order to not have delays down the road. And so that's kind of our little, I would guess, catch-all for some of those kiddos. So we would
Yeah.
determine if they're eligible.
I would say, if you're watching this and and you're like, oh, some kids that if they have that atypical, like with the head shape, it's like sometimes, if like I'd love to be able to go into every physician's office and be like, this is coming from a PT, but if there's a significant flatness that the child can't turn their head side to side, they are going to end up with delays most likely. So we don't necessarily, I'd love to tell those physicians, like, please send them, somewhere, where it's birth to three or private clinic, but somewhere to have that looked at, because 3 months or 2 months is a long time to wait. And we can make such changes with kids, if people understand how important early intervention is. But definitely with those littles, or if you have a 4-month-old that I would say every kid, if they don't take weight in their feet, and when you stand them up at 4 months, like that to me is what I'd call atypical, little red flag. It's not like super worrisome, but it definitely is like that's not typical, and we can give strategies to help that child move on. So yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then we decide that they're eligible, and then
Yeah.
what?
So, yep. So at that point, families get a choice if they want to move into first they have a choice if they want their child enrolled in birth to three, because sometimes they might take that information and decide they don't want to be enrolled. If they do choose that they want to be enrolled on that same day or a different day if they prefer, we can move into writing their individual family service plan. In that service plan, we're already going to have information in there on the child's development. Within that service plan, we'll also talk about why they were eligible for birth to three. And then after that, we're going to start talking about what it is that they want to work on. Those are kiddos' goals and outcomes. We like to talk about their daily routines and how we can support those daily routines, support those parents in helping their kiddo be successful within those daily routines. And then we also know that we will be meeting again in 6 months. So we like to think about what do we want to accomplish in the next 6 months for kiddos. So that's a big part of writing the individual family service plan, is really talking about goals and outcomes. Some families might have one goal. Some families might have 4 goals. It's really, it varies. Some families just say, I want my kiddo to talk. Some families are looking for resources. Some families are wanting to connect with other families. So we talk about a lot of things within that family service plan. Other pieces that are included in there are also services and who on our team can best meet that particular child and family's needs. So we have that conversation. And we talk about, well, where do we want those services to take place? Maybe daycare, maybe grandma's, maybe at home. We talk about frequency of services. Is it going to be a once a week service? Is it going to be 13 visits in the next 6 months? Kiki, you want to jump in and say something?
Oh, I was just saying, once we write the goals, then we come up with strategies too that the
Mm-hmm.
families use, and so or can use. And of course, that list continues to increase. But we, in this paper document or virtual document, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
we talk about those things. We always say, what is the family already doing? Because families already have some strategies that they're using. So we put those in and then we give more suggestions. We sometimes, show them, or we just discuss those, and they type it all into a document that that family gets, so they have that piece. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very important that we like to cover what they're already working on, because we, don't need to reinvent the wheel. If they're already trying something and it hasn't worked, they will share that, and the things that have worked, they're going to share. Um,
Right.
so from there, we're talking about frequency and who on our team can best meet our kiddos' needs. Families are also assured that they can have access to our whole team. So maybe their primary person coming in here, we'll talk a little bit more about coaching here in a little bit, but they always will have access to the whole team, but they're going to have one primary person coming in there, because the research has shown that parents are, that relationship with that primary person is really what's going to be most important. So we try hard to keep that same person going in there. It does change on occasion, but for the most part, we like to keep that same person going into homes. We talk about other resources families might want to access and how they can access that. And then we also talk about the transition out of birth to 3. So those are other pieces included in that plan.
Okay. Okay. That's good. And I think that that really sums up kind of what happens on that visit. It's a lot, but we get a lot of information, get to know the families. So yeah, so like as the primary coach, it's like Jessi said, that's the main person that goes in. We have meetings twice a month, and we talk about kids at least 2 times over the 6 months, right, Jessi? Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So, but if there's something like maybe I'm working with a kid and they're a lot of times late walkers are late talkers. So I've learned a lot of strategies for this talking, but if something's not happening, then I might go to the team at the meeting and talk about like, well, this isn't, and then the team will give more suggestions that I can use. So that's
Mhm.
really a nice option, and is available. So like we always tell families like if they go to their doctor and they're like, well, they're just getting PT. And we're like, yeah, but they do have a speech therapist on their team. It's just that a lot of times that example is we see that once kids start walking, then they often start talking. But we have people that can do what Jessi was going to talk about next is the joint visitors. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So our birth to 3 program is a little different than, let's say, a medical model in
right.
so when you're going to a therapy center, that's going to look different than what we're doing in birth to 3. Coaching is actually an adult learning strategy that we're using to build the capacity of parents and other caregivers really to develop new skills in working with their kiddos or supporting the ones that they do and build on that. So a big part of what we do is not necessarily hands-on working directly with the kiddo, but coaching the parent on the things that they can do. And we might do some things like model. Kiki does a great job of this. She might show a parent how to do something. Then she hands child over to parent, and they get to try that same thing on their kiddo. And she gets to coach them and put your hand here, or shift the baby this way, or stretch the baby like that. And sometimes Kiki will even use the parent as the model and show them, like, well, how did that feel on your neck? Of course, we're asking permission, and parents, can say yes or no for some of those things. But sometimes they need to feel like, oh, yeah, I can feel how that stretch feels.
So you
So
kind of have to, I was just saying that that primary coach, we are coaching the families because whether they have therapy once a week or every other week, it's like it's not going to matter. I could go there 5 times a week and it's not going to be as much therapy if it's in their routine based, So we give them that routine model of like, okay, so for that example of like stretching the neck, like every diaper change, try this. Or if they're working on speech, what would be an example for routine based working on speech example?
I would say a lot of times it's revolving around meals and snacks, because that is a routine that kids are doing 5 times a day. And so we really want that repetition. We know that that's super important, repeating those things. The most important pieces of this is really what's happening when we're not there. It's really important that families, caregivers, kids are going to grow and change and develop much quicker if the families are working on the strategies every day during all of their daily routines.
So we're not wrapping it up yet, Jessi, but I just want to say that I'm gonna have you back again because we could talk about routine-based therapy for an hour because
Oh
there's
yeah,
so
of
much
course.
great information. So
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And yep. So we use a coaching model with families. And Kiki had kind of started talking a little bit about joint visits. So um, sometimes, let's say, we are having some questions about a kiddo, and we have brought this information back to our team, which Kiki had mentioned. We meet with our team a couple of times a month, and we've gotten some information and some strategies, but maybe it's just not working, or maybe Kiki's just not quite understanding how that might look in person. And so what she might do is invite that speech therapist or that occupational therapist out to do what we call a joint visit. And on that joint visit, we're using that person to really coach us. What is the next thing we can do? What are you seeing? Help us understand this a little bit better. And then that joint visitor is making some offering ideas, offering strategies to Kiki and to the parents. And then all the follow up is then going to be done with Kiki and the parent. And so Kiki will come back. She'll, ask questions. How did it go? What worked? What didn't work? And then she might then again bring it back to the team and say, hey, at our team meeting, this is how it went. Now what should I do? And so it's just kind of an ongoing circle of supporting each other, supporting the family, answering their questions, but also not overwhelming the family by having a bunch of different people coming in at different times. So, yeah, so we use those joint visits to support the family and ourselves.
and I think it's in Minnesota, I mean, it's a federally mandated program, but
Mm-hmm.
every state does it differently a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. So, but
Yep.
this is super great information. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Minnesota does a coaching model just like Wisconsin does. So they're doing things very similarly to how we do things in Vert to 3 as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So, what is there anything else besides once decide we were going to give some examples of benefits and some special stories that we can remember, but is there any
Yeah.
other area you can think that we didn't touch on yet?
Um, we talk enough about transition out of birth to 3? I mean, I think we
No,
talked a
I
little
think
bit. We
yeah, I
cover
think
that.
that yeah, definitely a good resource. So even if parents like if what's kind of challenging is if a child is having speech delays and they get referred, when they're 2.5, which is of course a lot of times when parents get concerned, it just depends, then we still it's important to get them in the birth three program and get some strategies. But then yeah, why don't you just tell a little bit more about the transitions?
Yeah, so we're actually required to let the school districts know that kiddos are in the Birth to 3 program. This is something that families can opt out of and by signing a piece of paper, and they can also opt back into letting school districts know about it. But at 27 months of age, we actually have a system that we share with the school districts where we're required to send that notification. And then we're sharing kiddos' names, their date of birth, their parents' names, and their address. That's just so the school knows how many kids are kind of coming down the pike that they can
Yeah.
be prepared for. They don't know how many kids are in, or what the child is receiving for services. That's something that's discussed later on. Then around 32 to 33 months, that's when we actually have to decide, do we think this kiddo is going to need additional services when they turn 3? And might they qualify for school services? And then we go through the process of transitioning that kiddo by setting up a transition planning meeting with the school district. And then that starts their timeline of getting kids evaluated and determining if they're eligible. And then we see kids right up to the day before that they turn 3. And then if a kiddo qualifies for school services, they take over right when a kiddo turns 3. Keeping in mind, some schools do not offer services over the summertime. Sometimes families don't want to go, through the school programming. That doesn't happen very often, but if that's the case, some families will choose to do things like private therapy. So we might say, hey, here's St. Croix Therapy in Hudson, or here's, this other place in Stillwater, or this place in New Richmond. So we're offering a variety of ideas. Some families might want more information on Head Start or daycare. So we're covering all of those bases. We don't just cut people often say, see ya. We're really helping them transition to what's next.
Right, because yeah, sometimes we know the kid isn't going to qualify for school because they have to qualify in like two different areas. So if they're, except for speech, sometimes can they qualify for just speech?
Yes, sometimes the criteria for speech is very specific, but let's say it's a kiddo who has a lot of what we call like sound production errors or articulation. Sometimes those kiddos can qualify just in speech. Yes.
Because they know that if they don't get that taken care of, it's going to make it harder for 4K or early childhood. And so
Yep.
just so, each school district does it differently. And, hopefully people will be watching this video for many years. So we're not going to name certain school districts, but some
Yep.
some do
Hmm.
classrooms, some do say similar to birth to three.
Yep.
If families don't want them to go to school, but they do want the services, they can go to the daycare,
Hmm.
or to the home. So there's lots of
Hmm.
different great options. So no,
And
I
it
think
changes. It
yes, it
changes every
changes.
year. Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely an amazing program, which we're really, really lucky to have touched so many families. You figure 25 plus years we've been doing this. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really a gift. We love working with families, and it means a lot to families to have that relationship. And
Absolutely.
I was just thinking I thought it'd be fun, well, as we finish up here, to kind of think back at some of the great, with of course keeping confidentiality and everything. But
Hmm.
I think I have one family I'll share first of one family, the little girl was quite delayed. But in the beginning, sometimes we work with lots of kids that like they're just a little behind and then they learn to roll or sit up and then they start walking and they're discharged, right? But then there's a lot of kids too that have more involvement. They might not be able to hold up their head very well. And it's really a gift to go in to these families' homes to when they don't, maybe it's their first child and they don't know what to expect. And their friends and family don't understand, or they're just like, it's fine, they're going to be fine. And it's like they know, like, no, they're not going to be fine, but we love them and we're just wanting to
Hmm.
help them be the best person, best child they can be. And so
Yeah.
we're really honored to go in and help those families. And I had one family, it was during COVID, and we just had gone back to in person, and she's like, like, I just I did not even know what cerebral palsy was, and so you become, very a very trusted person to them. And I think that that's nice to have that support, for families to have that support.
Yep.
Um, Another family where she kept canceling, and I had a student for 12 weeks, and I was like, my student's been here for like 10 weeks and we've only seen you this many times. And so I was trying to help them, like, there's no shaming or anything like that. Just find out, like, how could we do this differently, because I really felt like I needed to be there more often to support them. And the mom finally came out and admitted that me coming to the house was not the typical reaction. It made her sad and made her realize things that were challenging for her child, and it made her more worried. So by her being able to, because I was a primary coach and I'd been there, she was eventually felt safe and comfortable to share that. And then we talked about that and figured out, and she's like, no, I would actually like you to come more regularly and I want to commit to this and stuff. And so that was really neat. And watching that family um, change and support the kid and just come to terms with things, but having that support. So that's one example. Do you have
Hmm.
any examples, Jessi?
I think I just think of all the families that sometimes we start out with their little itty bitty teeny tiny little new from the hospital babies. And we really are invested in these families and we develop relationships with these families. We cry with these families. Like and sometimes they cry on our shoulder because things are hard and we're there to support them. We're moms ourselves, so we love to, share stories and share successes. Um, because we do build these relationships and sometimes Kiki gets the benefit of sometimes working with kids even longer. I recently ran into a family when I was out at a store craft shopping, and the mom approached me and she's like, "Hey, is that Jessi Sterba?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And I'm in my brain and I'm thinking, "Oh, well, who is this? Like, I know this mom. What's her name?" And by the time I was done talking with her, I did remember her name, but her kiddos were like adults, and they were, or older youth, and it was just really fun for that parent to approach me and tell me about their kiddo and some of the things that they were doing. So it's really fun for us to hear some successes from some of these families down the road as well, because we really appreciate that. We really like hearing about that too. And we get just a huge variety of families in our Birth to Three program. And I think sometimes we're always surprised, like, man, I love going into that home, even though there's a lot going on and a lot of challenges. We build these bonds and these relationships with families, and families come in all different shapes and sizes. And we really, Kiki and I have been doing this for so long. Obviously, we like what we do, and we like going into homes and working with just such a huge variety of kiddos and families. So we're very lucky.
Yeah, what made me think of one thing we didn't touch on is that we work with the whole family because the whole family's there all the time. So sometimes parents are worried like, oh, I need to get grandma to take care of this one child, my other child, because they're going to be interrupting or whatever. And so we're always like, no, we're going to figure out ways to help. So that other child can be part of it. And so it's because when we leave, that sibling or siblings are going to be there. So we're going to want them to know how to manage that as well.
Yeah, and sometimes those siblings are the best way to actually teach that younger child. Like they may be the ones sitting there like reading books with them or talking with them or doing finger plays with them. And so, yeah, we oftentimes will include them, especially once we get going in the program, and they get pretty excited about that too.
One thing I thought of when you were talking about siblings, so what we do with our notes, we actually, believe it or not, in St. Croix County, we still write on paper that has a duplicate copy that we leave with the family. But we usually start out our session by asking like how things have been going, and we celebrate new things the child's doing. And sometimes the parents are like, there's nothing new. And then we start talking, and it's like, oh yeah, or I can remember because I don't see them every day. And I'm like, oh, actually now they are saying this word, or they are bending down from standing or walking along the furniture, and we'll write those down. And then we'll also write down like, oh, the parents were really busy this week, or kids got sick, or the parents just forgot, and they're gonna, so we didn't focus on this, this so much, or this hasn't changed. And then
Mhm.
we write down what we did during the session and how the families were educated and supported. And then we have a joint plan, so we talk about like, well, from the session, like what have you worked on, and with our session, like what do you want to focus on for that till we come the next time? And sometimes there's more than one, but it's really nice to not feel overwhelmed and have a couple things that you're really going to focus on. So sometimes, families will be like, I really want to work on having them asking them questions, or giving them a one word direction, or I really have been trying to like get them to transition from one piece of furniture to another. So they're really invested, and they are, because again, the therapy is not going to make the biggest changes if the family isn't engaged. And we know that certain families can engage on a higher level than others, and we meet people where they're at for sure. But
Yep.
it's a
Yep.
great program.
Yeah.
We love it.
We do. We love our little toddlers and babies, and Kiki and I get our baby fixes all the time, and then I get to go and laugh and giggle when I have, little toddlers that, say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Every time that I ask
Right,
the parents a question, they're responding for the parent. And yeah, we
right.
love what we do.
What was fun, yesterday, I didn't get to tell you this, Jesse, but we had a gal, she's in high school, and she came to volunteer at St. Croix Therapy, and she said she wants to go to become an OT, so she was observing for the day. She's a senior, and she said, I was in the Birth of Three program. I don't know who saw me. she wasn't even quite sure. She thinks it was more like sensory kind of issues, but then she said she did a motor intensive at our clinic, and it was just like, oh my gosh,
Wow.
and sometimes we even get, do you ever get graduation and like
I
announcements?
have. Yeah,
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
started to get
So
some of
like I
those.
said, some families were with a long time
Mm,
and we're really honored. So we're
yeah.
excited that we got to tell a lot about this. Jessi, I'm so thankful for you joining us. And like I said, I'll give you some time, but I think it'd be really great to teach people just about the routine model, so
Sure. Yep. Got
routine,
it.
what do you say, routine based model? Is that the wording?
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so just that little teaser that, I mean, yeah, definitely, even if you're watching this and you're like, and you're not going to be doing birth at 3, think about things you want your kids to be able to learn. If you do them on a routine base, it happens, they learn it, they practice it. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay. Well,
absolutely.
thanks so much, Jessi.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Bye, guys. Let me know what other things you want to learn about, and we'll do this again soon. Think I stopped the recording. That's my only thing. Let's see. Stop recording. There we
Yeah.
go. Bye,
Okay.
guys.